This is La Pizarra, a place where we explore creative minds in the entertainment industry on both sides of the mic and the camera. Here is your host, Nikki Mondellini.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of La Pizarra. I'm your host, Nikki Mondellini, and I'm very excited today to explore the creative mind of filmmaker Jenny Waldo, a Houston-based director, writer, and producer. She is also a film professor at Houston Community College. Jenny started her career writing and producing short films and documentaries, and she recently premiered her debut feature film, Acid Test, with great reviews. But before we jump into the interview, just a quick reminder that all of the episodes of La Pizarra are available on lapizarrapodcast.com and nikkimondellini.com/La Pizarra, where you can also read the transcripts of the last 2 seasons and you can sign up for the newsletter. And if you're enjoying the podcast, I would really appreciate your 5-star review on Apple Podcasts so that others can find us and benefit from the great information and all the valuable advice that is shared here by our experts in the entertainment industry. Before we go on with the interview, I want to tell you about Squadcast, the platform that I'm using to record most of the interviews for this podcast. Squadcast has excellent sound quality. And the best thing is that your guests can join the session from a computer or their mobile device from anywhere in the world. All they need is a stable internet connection. Find the link in the show notes and try Squadcast free for 7 days, and then you can decide which plan best fits your needs, either audio only or the video option. Squadcast has many advantages, like the possibility of having up to 9 people in the session, for example, in a virtual meeting. And you can download your mixed and mastered audio files with Dolby sound quality. Try it out at squadcast.fm/ref=La Pizarra. This link is in the show notes. Jenny Waldo got her start in the documentary educational industry of her hometown, Washington, D.C. Over the years, Jenny produced various scripted and documentary short films, as well as writing and directing her own award-winning scripted projects. Her producing credits include the indie feature The Preacher's Daughter, which sold to Lifetime, and the feature documentary The Cutting Edge, The Magic of Movie Editing. Jenny was program coordinator at the nonprofit Southwest Alternate Media Project, SWAMP, in Houston, and she now teaches filmmaking at Houston Community College. Her short film, Acid Test, screened at festivals all over the world with great reviews. It's based on Jenny's own tumble through self-discovery as a 1990s riot girl. It was then developed into a feature film and premiered to the world in the fall of 2022. Jenny's next project in development is also based on a true story, Martha's Mustang, which follows a woman in the male-dominated auto body shop world who fights City Hall to display a brightly painted purple Mustang as part of her shop sign. This project was recently selected as a Nickel Fellowship quarterfinalist. Well, welcome, Jenny. Thank you so much for joining me today on La Pizarra. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's amazing to talk to someone who has gone through all of this wonderful journey of being a filmmaker like you have, and you have gone through all of the difficult parts of creating, writing, developing the story and bringing your project out into the festivals and getting it known all over the place. But before we get into that, I would just like to go back to the beginning. And so how did your journey as a filmmaker begin?
So I really did not know what I wanted to do when I grew up. I didn't know what I wanted to be. I was a very creative kid. My father taught me how to develop black and white photography. We had a dark room in our basement. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, so I'm not local to Houston where I am now. And I grew up as a dancer. I was in a ballet company when I was little. And I played piano and, just had a lot of creative interests. But I was also very good at math. It was my best subject, which is kind of funny. So as I was getting older and once I got to college, I didn't know how to balance or synthesize these two very kind of different sides of my brain and interests. I actually started out in college intending to be a dance and math double major.
Oh my
So
gosh, that is just an amazing combination, I got to say. Not many people can say that. And wow, please continue.
yeah, so it was very interesting, and I didn't actually get along very well with the dance department at my college. Not that I didn't get along. I they had a very kind of specific idea of what kinds of dance they were doing, and it wasn't what I was interested in doing. And post calculus, math starts getting really crazy, and I didn't do very well in it anymore. And I kind of had to figure out what to do next. And so I decided to be an English major, just kind of by default, because they had enough classes that I thought I could take and be interested in. And then my sophomore year, we studied some film theory, which is kind of a side of filmmaking that is, it's not really part of the filmmaking, but it's kind of part of the academic side of film studies. And it's not really about film reviews. It's really about kind of thinking about the audience and how we present films and the images and all of this kind of different stuff. But it really just was this light bulb moment where, having, been a photographer and still doing photography, having choreographed dances and staged them, and kind of, I had always loved film. My dad was a huge film junkie, loved all the Star Trek and Star Wars and sci-fi movies. And my mother, who is from Eastern Europe, loved all the new wave films out of Italy and the Czech Republic, where she's from. And, all of these. So I had this kind of also an interesting film education, because I had these very artsy movies, and then I would go eat popcorn with my dad and watch some crazy, blockbuster. And I don't know, like I said, it was just this light bulb moment where I thought, well, I'm interested in this. I want to learn more. I want to learn more about how people make films. Obviously, there's an industry behind it where people have jobs. And so it just kind of was one thing leading to the next. And I had started writing a script after I took that class, where I basically took an image in my mind and started thinking about, well, what's the story behind this? As a photographer, I always had different ideas in my head, or I would see something on the street and be like, oh, that would make a great photograph. I was always thinking very visually. Mm-hmm. And again, with dance, having choreographed and staged things, I was familiar with kind of moving people and placing people and kind of directing people around. And all of a sudden, it just kind of synthesized into this idea of, this could be a film. What is this story? And so I started slowly kind of pointing myself towards learning more about the industry. And my senior year in college, I did an internship out on the Paramount lot, and it was my first time in Los Angeles. I had never been to California, and I basically showed up and was like, I love it here. I never want to leave. This is where I'm meant to be. And, it was just this wide-eyed, college student who was so excited to be immersed in people making films and just how exciting that is. And so I just wanted to learn as much as I could. The more that I learned about filmmaking, the more I wanted to learn. It was like pulling a thread on a sweater. It just was never ending. Uh-huh. And I thought I could move out to Los Angeles right after graduation with my, mini internship guiding the way, but it was a bit overwhelming for me at the time. And so I went back home to DC, where there's a large documentary and educational film industry. And I started working for some local producers there, not, in blockbuster films, but in, PBS films or Discovery Channel shows or, things like that. Mm-hmm. And it at least got me kind of my feet wet. And again, just kept on. The more I learned, the more I wanted to learn. And eventually I thought, I just need to go to film school because I kind of want to understand more about how to make this stuff instead of feeling like I'm constantly learning on the job.
Hmm.
And so I applied to film school and went to USC for my MFA in film production. So I got back to LA, which was wonderful. Learned a lot, did a lot. But then I graduated and ended up, my life took me to Houston in this very kind of roundabout way. And I've been here for the last 17 years or so. And, trying to find a way to continue with this passion of filmmaking while not being in a major film center like Los Angeles was.
Yeah. And do you think that that is exactly the setting that works for you? Because, of course, it is overwhelming to be in the center where everything is made. I mean, in LA, and the level of competition with a lot of people wanting the same job. And it's just craziness there. But do you think that being in Houston allows you to create more of your work at your pace and without a lot of distraction or just being overwhelmed?
I think that has shown to be the case. I think I've spent a lot of time thinking about or wondering whether I should have stayed in Los Angeles. It was largely family reasons and having children that just, took me away from there.
I want to ask you, you mentioned that teaching for you has been very rewarding. In what sense has it been rewarding?
Well, I teach at Houston Community College, and we get a variety of students from all different kinds of backgrounds. I have students that are older than I am who have retired from whatever their career was and have always been interested in making films. I have students who are fresh out of high school. I have students who've already done a bachelor's degree in some other kind of subject, but again, always wanted to do film and want to switch gears. And so it's really wonderful to be part of helping them find their voice and understand what goes into filmmaking. It's one of the things that I was doing anyways as a filmmaker, because I ended up specializing as a producer as well as writing and directing my own projects. I also produced other people's work. And so it was always something where, as a producer, I got to shepherd somebody else's vision through and help guide them and make it a success. And so as a teacher, I realized that really calls on those same kind of interests, I'm not only interested in telling my own story or the stories that I'm particularly interested in. It's one of the things that I love about being an audience member. I get to see all different kinds of things that I would never be able to make or even be interested in making, but I can still watch them and enjoy them and learn something from them or experience something new. So I really love that part of teaching. It also keeps me fresh, I guess, where I have to be thinking about what are people watching right now? How are people approaching things? The technology constantly changes. So being with those younger students who understand that technology in a way that's different than I would because it's native to them, whereas I'm kind of learning it as I go, or my background is still in film. Everything kind of comes from film first, and now I'm learning something new and adapting how I see things to that frame of reference, whereas for them, digital is native. That's how they learn things.
Yeah.
So it keeps me fresh. It keeps me, engaged in what's going on in the film industry, which of course is important as a filmmaker myself. But now there's that kind of extra responsibility of handing that down, and not just handing it down because somebody said it or it's in a textbook, but because I've experienced it myself. There's this urgency to continue to make work myself so that I continue to grow as a filmmaker and can pass things down as somebody who has experienced it And so that was really important to me. It was one of the reasons why I didn't really start teaching until I had had at least 10 years of experience in, making various films and doing things, because I wanted to have it come through a lived experience. And
For sure.
and then when you
Yeah.
teach something, it reinforces what you know about it, so it kind of forces
Yeah.
you to really understand it. So
Yeah, they say that one of the best ways for you to learn something and really hone in on that information is to teach it.
yeah.
Because that way is that you have processed it in your mind and translated it into a way where you explain it, and then you are able to just share it with that passion and with that complete understanding of the subject, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it also challenges me as a filmmaker, because really, especially as a writer director, the the goal is to communicate something. Communicate a feeling or an idea or character, a story, all of that stuff. And when you're trying to teach something, and to a certain extent, it doesn't matter what subject it is, but teaching something and understanding that your students are going to be learning it with a variety of advantages and disadvantages. From some are going to be better, verbal learners, and some are going to be better at, writing, and some are going to be better at test taking, and some are going to be better at hands-on stuff. And so
Hmm.
you're trying to communicate an idea in a variety of different ways. And I think that actually helps remind me as a writer director that I'm communicating something when I'm making my own films, and I have to make sure that that's clear for not just people that think like me or have similar experiences or, similar backgrounds.
Yeah, of course, you have to make it for everyone. Like it has to appeal to a large group of people. And how do you think your writing has been evolving since you first started writing your own work?
Well, I think it's true for a lot of people that when you look back at your stuff when you were younger, you're like, "Oh God, it's so terrible," or you're
But you got to start
you're
somewhere.
you're right, exactly. You have to start somewhere, and certainly I saw this I see this as a teacher, and I even saw it in film school too, where different people's life experiences, there are some people that are just amazing with their imagination, and they're able to express and empathize and communicate in these extraordinary ways, even if they've never experienced something personally
Hmm.
like what they're writing. But for the vast majority of people, we get better as we get more life experience, because again, we can see things from a variety of perspectives and understand our characters and be able to write them better because we have a more nuanced understanding of those things.
Yeah,
And that life experience really helps because it gives you that objectivity
for
instead
sure.
of kind of writing something that's a little bit more feral almost. It's just very
Yeah.
instinctual. And instinctual, again, there are people that are really amazing at honing that, and I think they have people that help shape that as well. But instinct and innate talent only takes you so far. At a certain point, if you want to do this again and again, you have to understand why something worked well. And that's where
Hmm.
I think that analytical side of, the math brain in me helps, where I can understand why something works better than others, and I can really push myself and push my students to really think about, well, don't just do it because it seems cool or you feel like it's great or whatever. That's a perfectly fine start, but you're never going to learn, you're never going to get better unless you understand why you're doing it that way.
Yeah, the why is absolutely the main thing. And also that way you can create three-dimensional characters and, as opposed to just people that say one or two lines, you know? It's like, how are you creating that story without them being really fully fledged characters and people that have so many different layers to them, and that way you can create those conflicts, right?
Exactly. And certainly working with actors, especially as you start, being able to work with better and better actors, they're going to come at you with all kinds of questions and, I don't understand this and why is this happening? And they're going to challenge your writing. They're going to challenge your understanding of these characters. And, one, they're challenging it because they're not you, and so they're coming at it from a different perspective. And they're going to challenge it because they need to find their inroads into how to create that performance and how to give that authenticity, and they
Yeah.
have their own process. And so you have to find ways to be able to understand it and communicate it and work with people to whether it's your actors or your DP or your production designer, all the various people you're going to be working with. You have to be able to say, this is what's happening in this moment, this is why, this is what's important about it. And that often just takes time.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. It takes time to develop. And then the interesting part also about you with have been a photographer as well is that you know exactly where you want to place that camera and where it's going to help you tell the story and what things you want to enhance to really make those moments really crucial and important, right? I mean, it's I don't think it's that easy. I mean, you do have to have all that experience to put all of that together, right?
Yes, I mean, certainly the more experience you have, the easier to a certain extent, but every film is its own experiment, and so you can't ever make the same movie again, even if it's with the same people. I certainly felt that with Acid Test because we had started it as a short film, and we had a lot of the same actors and a lot of the same crew members in the feature film, but it was just a completely different beast because we had, many more days. We switched up some of the positions. We had new people. It was a different story to a certain extent. There was just a lot of things that were different. And I think that's where you also have to rely and trust on your collaborators.
Mm-hmm.
This idea that a director has this perfect vision and knows exactly how they want things to be and basically puppet masters everybody, and I think that's, it's a lie, it's a farce, and I don't want to take credit for that either. I Because the work that I've done has always been better when I've partnered with and collaborated with my actors and my DP and
Mm-hmm.
all of my cast and crew, because they
Yeah.
always come up with something that I'm like, oh yeah, that would be great. That really works with what I'm trying to do, and it makes whatever my idea was better. And certainly there are times where you don't want to take every idea. Like you want to make sure you have.
Yeah.
It's a delicate balance of like, what's your vision? What are you trying to do? But also being able to kind of incorporate these external uh, suggestions
Mm-hmm.
to see where your idea is actually enhanced better because you're taking somebody else's take on it. So,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. You do need that balance, but it's great to work as a team and get the fresh perspective, but you still hold the reins and right. I mean, things still have to align with your vision. And how was creating Acid Test and writing about it when it's such a personal part of your life? How was that experience for you and you finally wanting to tell that story and how you saw it develop?
well, it scared me a lot at first, especially with the short film, because that was the first approach was the short film, and I was really terrified of kind of telling the world that I had done drugs and and that I have a dysfunctional family, and my parents didn't, we didn't always get along, and it was very personal in that sense. But I really believed that it would make an interesting film, and I really believed that there were other people that could relate to this crazy experience of dropping acid and going home to your parents and telling them that I was tripping and having them freak out on me while I was still in the middle of the drug experience. That was really the kernel of the short film, and I felt like that it would be something interesting and relatable and challenging and all of these things. And so, but it was also scary in that sense because it was so personal. And so by the time we were doing the feature film, I think there were a lot of people who saw the feature film and were like, "Oh my God, that's so personal." And I was like, I'm over it by this point, like it kind of stopped. And making films always reminds me to a certain extent of my experiences giving birth to my children. Because, there's all this stuff that you do and you plan and you're trying to kind of make things all perfect. And you have these ideas of how you want it to go. And then the birth happens and you're like, this is off the rails crazy. Like nothing's happening the way it's supposed to. Like I'm out of my mind. All of these things that you were like, no, I would never want to do it. You're like, I don't care at this point. Just like, you just give up. And not give up. It's more like you let go. You let go and you kind of let the process happen. And making films, I think, is always that, but especially going through the feature experience and taking the short into the feature was a very deep dive into learning how to let go of things. So
I mean, for sure. But that kind of a story is just so powerful because you're so invested and because there's so many elements that you're so familiar with. And yes, they are hard to tell. But when you finally bring it out and you get over those hurdles, I mean, you make magic, it's just beautiful.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And how is the process of the distribution as an independent filmmaker? Because people don't realize it. I mean, it's probably even the hardest part of making the film, right? I mean, you're there, you got your actors, and yes, you got your story and everything, and it's just, okay, it's there. And now comes the next part, right? So how do you even start with projecting or making your plan of just entering it into festivals and the whole thing? So how is your experience with that?
It's certainly been a learning curve. I've seen friends of mine distribute their feature films, and I've attended a bunch of workshops and talked to different people who have experience in distribution. And I really thought that I was as prepared as I could be to distribute the film, and similar to what I was just talking about with the birthing experience, the actual experience was nothing like what I thought it would be. And it's definitely been challenging. I think there were a lot of things that I already knew about. For example, we don't have any well-known actors in our film, and I'm a first-time feature filmmaker, so there's no name attached to it. We don't have any celebrity endorsement, so to speak. And I knew that was going to be challenging going into distribution because it is one of the selling points of any film. And it's hard even at the festival stage because a lot of the larger festivals are really there to promote the independent films that are being made by industry professionals, since the studios have really gone into the franchise territory of Marvel and, comics and Harry Potter and all of that stuff. And so all of the great dramas and the great kind of low budget films that get Oscars and are, have been a staple of the industry for many, many years have just disappeared. There's no space for that. And so that's now taking up a huge part of what we call independent cinema, but it's not really independent cinema when you've got these major names attached to it, whether it's the director, the actors. And so that's certainly challenging. The landscape is challenging. The economy is challenging. We were finishing this film in the middle of COVID, so we had no idea what was happening with anything. We didn't know if festivals were going to run, because you usually are applying to a festival about 6 months before the festival actually happens. So you have to apply very far in advance, even more than 6 months sometimes. So, and you don't find out if you've gotten into a festival until about a month before the festival actually happens, and sometimes even later. So there's so much uncertainty, and it's a lot like gambling. You've got this thing that, I felt like we did such a great job of making this film on a very small budget. We were on budget, we were on schedule, we made it, and I think we did a really great job with everything that we had, and we made that magic happen. But then you're taking this entity and you're kind of putting it out into the world, and you have no idea what those programmers are going to be looking for. You don't know what other films are going to be coming out and being programmed against. At the same time, you don't know what's happening in the world that's going to change or affect how people take your film. And so there's certainly a huge risk to that. I do think festivals are really important for true kind of independent filmmakers like me who are working outside of the system and not having name talent and things like that, because it is a way to build your network. The programmers that are at smaller festivals will eventually maybe become programmers at the larger festivals. So it is a community, a networking people business. And so you want to tap into that. And so festivals are a huge part of that, both just attending and meeting other filmmakers who are screening their films, as well as, having your own films programmed. I think it's a really important part. But then you're still only being seen by a small selection of a potential audience, the people who are going to these festivals. And so then there's this whole world of how do you get it onto streaming platforms and how do you make it available? And there are all these different kind of levels of, self-distribution, basically, where you can put it up on YouTube and just let it, have it available for anybody, or you could charge, or then there are all these various services, and then there's Netflix at the top. And yeah, it's been a huge learning curve, and I've tapped into people. We had a distribution consultant, Liz Manischel, who came on board early to kind of help us navigate through some of that. And then we had a sales rep come on board, Circus Road Films, and they helped get us a deal with Giant Pictures, who is our digital distributor. And so now we are available on rental platforms, and we are hopefully going to land a subscription deal with like a Hulu or a Showtime or a Starz or something, where there are subscribers, and then eventually go on to the advertising-based video on demand. But yeah, it's a lot of, it's a lot like gambling. You're putting your baby out there, you're paying money for different things and trying to see, is it gonna get, is somebody gonna pick it up? Yes, no, I don't know. So it's the least, for me as a producer and as a writer-director, I have the least amount of control, which is probably the most uncomfortable part of it. And especially at least with festivals, you can sit there with your audience and you have your Q&As and you get a sense of who's coming and how they're responding to it. With people watching things online, you just don't know how it's landing. But I'm not one of those film purists like Christopher Nolan or Martin Scorsese who only want people to go to the theaters. I think the digital revolution is amazing. I
Yeah.
just, it
Just goes
is a
out to more people.
community-based, thing. So just trying to kind of connect with people and, see how they're liking it. It is still such a big part of it. So.
And you have a dedicated website so people can go there and they can find out where they're going to be screenings or just sort of like the development of it and which platforms they can subscribe or they can see it, right? So
Exactly. Yeah. So
is it Acid Test?
It's acidtestfilm.com.
Okay.
And yeah, we have all the links to the platforms that it's available on now. And certainly as that changes, we'll add an update to the website. And then if you go through the blog, you can read all about the development, however much people are interested in how things changed over time. I've tried to be transparent about the process. Again, as a film teacher, I think it's important to be transparent about the process because, again, there are so many things, and I certainly felt this during distribution, where you don't know what you don't know, and then there are people who have experience and who do know, and then they'll forget to mention something that seems pretty obvious, and then you find out, after the fact, or, you're kind of like, oh, if I had known this beforehand, then maybe I would have, like, for example, there were a few different groups that I was able to join. Once your film has a premiere, you can, as a female filmmaker, you can join the Film Fatales, which is a wonderful group that was created by an independent filmmaker, and they offer discounts to submissions. And sometimes there are waivers to different festivals, and they'll actually help recommend your project for some of these festivals or workshops or things like that. Okay. But by the time I had submitted to join, I had already applied to all the festivals that I was interested in. So I couldn't take advantage of any of those discounts. And you just don't know what you don't know. So
exactly. You learn as you go. And so now you can apply all of that to Martha's Mustang.
Yes,
so
yes.
Tell us a little bit about how that story came about and who brought it to you, because it's a true story.
Yes. So I was, so it was in between the short film for Acid Test and the feature film. I got an email from a guy in Houston named Tom Eischen, who is he is now a retired insurance agent for cars. And he had heard this story about a woman who owned an auto body shop in Baytown, Texas, which is outside of Houston, and that she had to sue City Hall for the right to keep this hot pink Mustang planted with wildflowers as part of her shop sign after the city said it was a violation of their junk car ordinance and were telling her to tow it off her property. And, it was a David and Goliath type story about, a woman not just, fighting City Hall and suing the city, but also she's a woman in a very traditionally male field of auto body repair. This also happened in the 90s, which is a similar time frame for Acid Test. So I feel like I'm making these based on true story 90s films right now. But I thought that it was yeah. But I thought it was intriguing. I thought it was very visual. Tom had taken some classes at the Southwest Alternate Media Project, or SWAMP, which is an organization I've been involved with ever since I got to Houston. And I think he had taken some screenwriting classes. And so kind of knew enough to be dangerous, when it comes to filmmaking, and had seen that Acid Test had done well in the festival circuit for the short film. And he was just kind of looking for a filmmaker partner because he doesn't know really anything about making films, just kind of enough to get connected. And so I met with Martha, and she seemed interested in taking this on board. And I started doing documentary interviews with some of the main people involved. Again, I got my start in documentary and have continued to do documentary over the years in one way or another. And I think that especially when it comes to based on true stories, you have to get the true story before you can start figuring out how to manipulate it or change it or make it fit for a narrative film. So I was working on that, and then Acid Test, the feature film, started taking shape, and so I knew I was going to be busy for a while on that. So I asked a couple of people to come and shoot a short teaser for Martha's Mustang before we went into production on Acid Test. And so we did that with Sarah Gaston, who's a local actress, and my friend Rob Nielsen, who's a local DP, shot it. And we had, just a great time shooting this little teaser scene. And then the project basically went dormant for the next couple of years as I, was doing Acid Test. And so during COVID, once Acid Test was in post-production, to the point where I was not involved, I was kind of just waiting to make notes on things, I was like, well, we're getting ready to premiere Acid Test. I want to make sure that I have whatever's next, because that's always the question. This was great. What's next? And so, and I've seen so many filmmakers get stumped by that question, where they spent so much time making the thing that they're now premiering, which might be wonderful, but if you don't have something next, you're basically dead in the water. There's no forward momentum, producers, managers, people, it just kind of, you kind of get stuck. And so, so I started drafting out what I thought might work for Martha's Mustang, and I submitted it to the Nickel Fellowship, which is run by the Academy, and it's one of the top screenwriting competitions. And we got placed as a quarterfinalist, which was huge.
Amazing.
I had never done that. It was amazing. And they give you feedback from, I think, 6 different readers. And I was like, wow, this is really great. And it gave me a lot of things to think about for the next draft. And so I just kept on plugging away at it. And I have a writer's group that I was workshopping it with. And it got to the point where I was like, I feel like it's in good condition, in the sense that I'm not horribly embarrassed by any parts of it. But I just feel like I need to kind of take it to the next level, which is, having actors read it out loud and, kind of workshop it that way. And we had done a table read for Acid Test when it was going from the short to the feature. And it was really helpful for us to get to the feature, the final kind of shooting draft of Acid Test. And so I went to my producer, Anna Tran, from Acid Test, and I said, let's do it again, only let's try and get the city to pay for it, because the city of Houston, through the Houston Arts Alliance, has these grants that support artists. And so we applied for it and got it. And I had a friend who had gotten it a couple of years before, and he had workshopped just a couple of scenes from his feature that he was working on. But we read the entire script in front of an audience, and we partnered with the Cinema Arts Festival here in Houston because they're looking to do more process-oriented programming, not just screening films, but how you make them. And and they're also really trying to connect more with and support the local film festival or the film community. We had screened Acid Test with them last year, and we sold out, so we had to do an encore screening. And this year they were saying the local Houston documentary, Friday I'm in Love, based on Numbers, the club, that also sold out for their Houston Cinema Arts Festival screening, and so they're doing an encore screening. So it seems like the Houston crowd is really responding to Houston films. And so So it was wonderful. We had, that gave us a day and a time and a framework to put on this workshop. We had the funds to do the table read, to hire local actors, and again, just really put a spotlight on what we can do here in Houston, because there is such a wealth of talent here, both
Yeah.
as cast and crew, and it's really wonderful to work with everybody, and I really want to help highlight it and support it and have it all grow. And then we also, right on the heels of that, got into a producer's lab through Stowe Story Labs, which is based in Vermont. And that was really one of the first industry things that I've been connected with since kind of my time in the industry a million years ago. And so, this project really seems to be capturing people's attention, and the producing lab was 4 days, meeting with different mentors and different people, trying to figure out what are the best ways to approach name talent or find investors. The project is certainly bigger in scale than Acid Test was, so it will require more resources. I do think that it is possible to do it as an indie, with, again, local cast and crew, because we have amazing people here. But the distribution side of Acid Test has really shown me how difficult it is to promote a film when you don't have that name talent. And so with Martha's Mustang, I feel like it's in the project's best interest, especially since it has been getting these kind of external accolades, to see what we can package together as we move forward. Because I kind of always have it in my back pocket that I know we can do an amazing job with local cast and crew. But, there is that business side of things, which pains me sometimes, because I hate that it might take away from, somebody locally taking that position. But
I know it's hard, but it is what it is.
Yeah. So I'm trying to see. I'm trying to see what happens, but it's been a lot of fun so far, and we got a lot of great feedback, and it was really wonderful that you and all these other actors came out to play, and that to me is just the most fun thing about all of this stuff. It's
a great experience for sure. And also, where can people find out, like, in the development of this, how it progresses and the whole thing? Do people just follow you on social media for that? I mean, I'm going to put all of that information and your social media handle, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see how it all develops.
Yeah, I do have a page for Martha's Mustang on my own personal website, so jennywaldo.com. There's a tab for Martha's Mustang, and so I've been putting kind of the main things there. And then certainly following me on social media. I'm at Jenny Waldo on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Those are the places where, in addition to kind of everything else, I'll also be posting about it. But it's definitely a really interesting and exciting time. I really am looking forward to jumping into rewrites. That was one thing that I realized coming out of the producing lab, was that, I do have to, in this letting go theme that this interview has taken on, I think I'm going to have to let go some of the producing reins and really focus more on the writing, directing side of things, because it's so hard to kind of juggle all of those things. And I certainly felt that during the producing lab, where I was like, I just got all these writing notes, and now I'm trying to pitch it to these mentors, and I was just, my brain was kind of locking up. But they had so many great suggestions, and I think in the independent world, you do have to be a producer and a director, even if, maybe you don't write everything, or a producer and a writer, but you don't direct it. I think, being a producer and having produced other people's stuff, I do know how to get things done. I know how to get things done in a way that works. And again, I'm always open to suggestions and collaboration, all that stuff. But there are so many things that I don't know still, and that I don't know what I don't know. And distribution has certainly shown me a lot of that. And I feel like going into this second project, I do need to find a producer who has just more experience and more of that network, if we really want to try and make it more of an industry project, because that's just kind of a whole side of the world that I don't have as much experience with. So it was really kind of great to come to that realization, although somewhat horrifying at the same time. Where I was like, oh God, I need somebody else who knows more and is more experienced and can help shepherd this project. So,
and opening it up to that, the right person will come along to be your producer and to make it in what it is and how you envision it, and to bring it up to everything that it deserves to be done for this story and this film, which is, I think it has great potential. I mean, it's a fabulous story, and I really like the way you wrote it, and I'm sure with all the rewrites that you have in mind, it's just going to be enhanced even more. So I'm really interested to see what turn it's going to take, and so a lot of good, important things are happening in that sense, and so. Yeah, I mean, best of luck with everything, and congratulations. And thank you. I mean, it's I love that you shared all of that. This podcast is also for people who are in the industry and who are contemplating being producers or being actors or writers. I mean, everything that comes together into creating a project. And so, I mean, thank you for sharing all of that. This has been a wonderful, wonderful moment for people to learn about all those things from you, how you've experienced that, and how you've grown as a writer, as a producer, as a filmmaker. So, I'm going to put all of the links in the show notes so that people can follow you, and I'll be sharing updates as well in my newsletter. So I do hope more people will sign up for that newsletter, and we'll help get the word out for Acid Test and for Martha's Mustang. So thanks.
Thank you so much. It's just wonderful. And I really appreciate the opportunity to, try to reach more people and to connect with you. And again, just supporting what people are doing here in the Houston area. And obviously we have ties to things beyond Houston, but I just think it's really important to work with each other. So
yes, for sure. And like you said, there's so much talent in Houston. I mean, on both sides of the camera, crew and actors and everyone. And we're just waiting and just avid to put all of that into work, because there's a lot to be done here. So yeah, let's get that ball rolling. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Jenny.
Thanks for joining us on La Pizarra. Want to listen to more episodes? Visit lapizarrapodcast.com or nickimondolini.com/La Pizarra, where you can sign up for our newsletter and get exclusive previews of future episodes, as well as resources for your creative business. Tune in next week for another interesting interview.